The 2nd Avenue subway is one of the most anticipated subway expansions in New York City. Plans for this line have existed over a century ago in 1920, and in that time frame, only 3 stops have been completed. It almost seems like the entire line is never even going to get completed. This line is sure to be a hot topic for New York City subway expansions. So for today, we'll take a look at the 2nd Avenue subway's 4 phases, putting my thoughts on it, and we'll also discuss possible northern and southern expansions for the line. The 2nd Avenue subway is currently divided in 4 phases. Currently, phase 1 is complete, and it was an extension from the 57th Street 7th Avenue station to Lexington Avenue 63rd Street. Note that the Lexington Avenue 63rd Street station was rebuilt to accommodate the line, but from the previously mentioned stations, it turns onto 2nd Avenue with just 3 measly stations, 72nd, 86th, and 96th respectively. I really think phase 1 was a great addition to the subway system, with commuting to and from 2nd Avenue getting much easier. For a little bit, let's jump off track and discuss the design of the stations. Here, there are a few complaints that I hear from many. One is the preference of side platforms over island platforms. I do agree with this criticism, but honestly, it isn't much big of a deal. The benefit from side platforms is that you have a wall facing your back as you wait for the train. And also, the platforms will feel much less crowded since people are going to be divided on 2 platforms rather than everyone being on one. My only problem is that I think they kind of overdid it in some areas. For example, the huge mezzanine that is almost the same length as the platforms. The station isn't in Times Square, there's no need to make it that huge. Of course, making stations spacious is a good thing as there will be more room for passengers to move around, but I feel like they're just a little bit too huge. Some money could possibly even be saved by crunching the size down a bit. However, I do have to give the MTA credit because all the new stations come with all the bells and whistles. They have air conditioning, adequate lighting, low vibration and low noise tracks. They even come with elevators and escalators right off the bat for accessibility. And the stations were also built extremely deep underground to prevent noise from the subway from being heard on the street. But this also comes with another perk, to prevent any damage that could occur from natural disasters. Because, yeah. Now on to phase 2. This phase is currently under construction. Hopefully. But this phase will extend the Q line 3 more stops, 106th, 116th, and 125th. The 125th Street station will be directly under the existing station of the same name with the 4, 5, and 6 trains at Lexington Avenue. Now we hear some people are upset with this because there won't actually be a station at 125th and 2nd. And another thing is that there won't be a 103rd or 110th, which is what most other lines in Manhattan have. Now I kinda understand why people don't like the location of the 125th Street station, but I'm pretty sure they made it that way to allow for a transfer to the Lexington Avenue line and Metro North. As far as the 106th Street station goes, honestly, it's whatever. I actually like this more than having a 103rd and 110th Street station because less stops means faster trains. Also, most stations are literally 10 streets away anyways. Most lines have a 34th Street, 23rd, and 14th. And if you do the math, all those stations are about 10 streets away. So honestly, there's nothing to complain about here. 106 is 10 streets away from 116th and 96th. Honestly, people need to just stop being babies and just deal with it. Now it's time to talk about the big boy, phase 3, which will add 6 stops. 55th, 42nd, 34th, 23rd, 14th, and Houston Streets. All of the mentioned stations will be served by a new line, the T. I honestly don't have much issues with phase 3. However, the transfers to Lexington are quite strange. For example, at the 55th Street stop, you can transfer to the E and M at Lexington 53rd, which is not too far off from where the 55th stop should be. But if you want to transfer from the T to the 6, you're going to have to walk the entire length of the E and M platform. But regardless, this is a good transfer point, allowing transfers to and from Queens to access the T line. Now, one transfer I'm not a big fan of is at 42nd Street, where a transfer to all of the IRT at Grand Central will be built. You have to walk an entire avenue to get to the 7, and that's the end of the 7 platform. You're going to have to walk even more to get to the 4, 5, and 6. And let's not even talk about the shuttle. In total, from 2nd Avenue, you have to walk about 4 avenues to get to it. Now, of course, what else do you expect the MTA to do here? They did it to get a transfer to more trains and the Metro North. The only thing that it thought of is to maybe prevent people from walking that much is maybe a 2nd Avenue station on the 7th line, but honestly, it's not that worth it at all. As far as the other stations in phase 3 and 4, they're just alright. There's nothing really to comment on about that. Now, before we jump into the ideas for expansion into the outer boroughs, we have to address a little elephant in the room. There is no express service along the 2nd Avenue line. If you look at all the other trunk lines in Manhattan, whether it be Broadway, 6th Avenue, 7th Avenue, 8th Avenue, Lexington, they all have express on deck. Now, I'm not saying that you should take Lexington instead of 2nd Avenue because it has an express. The thing is that it just seems mandatory for vertical lines in Manhattan to have express service. Now, of course, this is just for now. The Q can't be express because it only runs on 2nd Avenue north of 63rd. And the T can't be express because it literally has to serve all the stops. So this is going to need a new line running along 2nd Avenue. Now, I'm hoping that some sort of provision for express service is left to make it easier for the future in case the decision is implemented. My idea for an express, let's call it a V train. It will make a jump from 14th Street to 42nd, kind of like how Lexington is. Yes, this is just 2 stations that will be skipped, but that's pretty much the most that you can do here. And also, it doesn't really make sense to have an express south of 14th Street. Houston and Grand are transfer points on the line, and no other line has express in lower Manhattan anyway. You can't add express north of 63rd either because that portion of the line is already done. Now, some may argue that it's pretty much worthless to have express on 2nd Avenue, and one major reason why is because the stops are pretty decently spaced apart. And honestly, I do kind of agree with this. And also, if an express is made, then it's going to have to terminate elsewhere than Hanover Square. Or maybe it could split off and go somewhere else. Anyway, onto the extensions to the outer boroughs. Since we just discussed a new subway line to run express on 2nd Avenue, maybe this new line could run into Queens after 42nd or 55th. Also, maybe it could connect to the 63rd line or run in a new tunnel under the East River to Queens. Queens needs a new line. The only lines that actually exist are Queens Boulevard and Flushing, and they are both severely overcrowded. As far as the 60th Street tunnel goes, it's off limits. Now for Brooklyn. I know some people want the T to run on the bridge or maybe connect it to the Nassau line and then to Montague to make the extension to Brooklyn less expensive. But the problem is you're going to have to get rid of Catham, Seaport, and Hanover Square. Now, some of you may not have a problem with this, but the 2nd Avenue line is all about providing the east side with transit, and I think we should keep this testament going. If they are kept, our V train could just serve those stops and terminate at Hanover Square. But this is far beyond phase 4. But if the T is sent on the bridge into the Brighton or 4th Avenue line, the B and D, one of them is gonna have to skedaddle. And sending trains via Nassau and through the Montague Tube might just screw up the lines that are already there on 4th Avenue. Not saying that these are bad ideas, but I'm just mentioning what's going to happen afterwards. But hey, maybe this will let the T train run on West End, where it originally went. Now, the actual proposal for Brooklyn is to let the T run in a new tunnel and run on the Fulton Street line with the A and C. Pretty much everything is existing, which is pretty cool. The Court Street station that it was supposed to use as a stop is currently repurposed as the Transit Museum. So maybe a new Court Street stop is going to have to be built underneath it or something. But if the T runs on Fulton, then I think the A and C should just be express, and then the C could go to Lefferts Boulevard. It just makes the most sense. For the Bronx, the most obvious thing and what most people want it to do is to replicate the old 3rd Avenue L. Of course, with less stops, because the stops on the L were kind of too frequent. What kind of sucks is that the whole thing will have to be rebuilt from the ground up after its demolition in the 1940s and 50s. The 1939 version of the plan called for the line to run near 3rd Avenue and then turn towards the east and head over to Throggs Neck. And a further plan called Route 132B would have used abandoned railroad tracks to let trains run to Dyer Avenue, replacing the 5. Then another branch will be built off of it, replacing the 6 line from the Whitlock station to Pelham Bay. Now, you all might think this is a stupid idea because it literally doesn't add crap, But this does help with overcrowding on Lexington. All of those 5 and 6 train riders will now become 2nd Avenue riders. It's just that the tunnels along the Dyer Avenue line are going to have to be made wider, and the platforms will have to be lengthened for B division trains. My personal opinion is that yes, it will help with overcrowding on Lexington. With diverging people from Lexington lines to the 2nd Avenue line, it honestly isn't really that big of a deal. Just make the line serve a new area and that's it. And finally, the 125th Street Crosstown line. The 125th Street terminal on the Q and T will have storage tracks that extend towards the west from the station. And maybe this could allow for a line to run along 125th Street, maybe to St. Nicholas Avenue with the A, B, C, D lines, and maybe to Broadway with the 1 if that's possible. The MTA's 20-year needs assessment document mentions this line, but adds more ideas, like turning the line north to 137th Street on various different avenues, or letting the line turn and run with the A, B, C, and D north of 135th. I think the 125th Street line is more important than phases 3 and 4, and honestly, after phase 2, they should just go ahead and build this next. The 125th Street corridor is just a huge mess. To wrap things up, one thing with the 2nd Avenue subway and pretty much all subway expansions is that they are expensive and take excruciatingly long to complete. And all we can do is just hope that all things go well here. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching everyone. Make sure you check out my 2nd channel where I edit the subway maps depicting the 2nd Avenue subway in all of its phases. Thanks for watching once again, and see you next week. And if I'm lazy, then I'll see you in 2 weeks, or a month, or 2 months. But see you in the next video.